Tonight, we will celebrate the raucous holiday of Purim, a day that we jokingly boil down to a three-part message. They tried to kill us, we won, let's eat. On this day, as we all know, we commemorate our salvation from wicked Haman, and we honor the courage of Esther and Mordechai, who reversed our people's fortune. In the Megillah, Haman is called Ha'agagi, meaning that he was a descendant of King Agag, ruler of the Amalekites. And the ancient enmity between Israel and Amalek underlies the relationship between Mordechai and Haman. Thus, our maftir on the Shabbat Zachor, the Shabbat of Remembrance, recalls the cruelty the Amalekites showed the newly freed Israelites coming out of Egypt. Amalek surprised them on the march when they were famished and weary, and viciously attacked the stragglers at the rear, the weakest and most vulnerable among the escaping slaves. The author of the Purim story views Haman through the lens of this history. Like his evil ancestor, Haman plotted our destruction. Amazingly, in both instances, the Jewish people survived, as we have survived so many attacks and have continued to flourish despite our grievous losses. The Purim holiday centers on a truth we know all too well, the precariousness of life. It is fitting that the word Purim means lots, for casting lots is based on randomness and unpredictability. For the Jewish people, both our history and our present day teach us the painful lessons of uncertainty, in which highs are suddenly followed by lows, and our sense of security can evaporate seemingly overnight. We have learned again and again that we are subject to the whims of political actors. One day we feel at home in our country, a place founded on democracy and liberalism, and the next day we can't recognize it. One day is October 6th, and the next day our world is turned upside down. How do we deal with this pervasive sense of vulnerability and uncertainty? It's a perennial challenge, of course, to maintain our equilibrium when the ground beneath our feet seems to be shifting. But Purim has its own particular coping strategy. For one day in the year, we laugh in the face of evil. We shoo away our worries with food, drink, and silly costumes. We drown out our fears with the noise of the grogger. Just for today, we live in the moment. You've heard the famous saying about rejoicing in the face of uncertainty. Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. It comes, by the way, from the book of Isaiah. That might be the motto of Purim. But this year, for many of us, that philosophy feels inadequate. Some of us are struggling more than usual to experience joy this Purim. How can we rejoice when October 7th is still a fresh wound for many of us? How can we laugh and be silly when 134 of our brothers and sisters are suffering in captivity and have been for nearly 6 months now, as their loved ones wait in agony? And other Israelis, driven from their homes, live in fear of rocket fire. Some of us feel reluctant to go overboard in our eating and drinking when thousands of Palestinians are dead or starving, mourning loved ones, and living in constant fear of bombs and airstrikes. For so many reasons, it feels like a year to temper, modify, or even suspend our Purim celebration. And I believe there is a place for acknowledging the current situation in which Purim falls. Some of those who fasted this year on Ta'anit Esther just this week dedicated their fast to the hostages, and others included the Palestinians as well who are suffering. But for me, to say there's no room for joy is not the answer. I was struck by the words of Sarah Reinstein, an Israeli mother and psychiatrist. She said, "On the one hand, we are all dealing with trauma. On the other hand, we need the joy." Palestinians in Gaza also desperately need the joy. They are marking Ramadan this month. However, this month of fasting during which the Quran was revealed is not the joyous occasion it normally is. We made no preparations to welcome Ramadan because we've been fasting for 5 months now, said Maha, a mother of 5 in Rafah, who would normally have filled her home with decorations and stocked her refrigerator with supplies for the evening iftar celebrations when people break their fast. But she says they will eat canned food and rice and try to find hope wherever they can. The cruel irony of fasting when you're already starving. However, some Palestinians say that choosing to fast in a holy way is restorative in their dignity and their agency. Ramadan is a blessed month, despite the fact this year that it's not like any other. but we are steadfast and patient, and we will welcome the month of Ramadan with decorations, songs, and prayers, said Nehad El-Jed. For Israelis and Jews around the world, our children need the joy of Purim, and we need it too. For Norman Goldwasser, a psychologist who treated Israeli victims after the October 7th attacks, it's simple. He said, "No one should allow Hamas to dampen our ability to celebrate a joyous holiday." The Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law, is instructive here. It teaches that if we are in mourning for a loved one when Purim arrives, we should continue mourning privately. Publicly, however, we should participate in the holiday. Rabbi Moses Isserlis, who provides the Ashkenazi perspective, adds, "One goes to the synagogue to hear the Megillah, and there are those who say that no public mourning practices are performed on Purim, and this is the way to behave. Mourners may hear the Megillah read privately at home if they prefer, but the Shulchan Aruch encourages even mourners to come out to the synagogue as they would on Shabbat. Mourners are still obligated to send mishloach manot, although they don't have to receive them if they prefer not to, perhaps because receiving such gifts might intrude on their private time of mourning. Even a mourner who has not yet buried their loved one, called in Jewish tradition an onen, is permitted to eat meat and drink wine at the festive Purim meal because the individual positive obligations of Purim do not supersede the communal obligation of rejoicing on Purim. At least in public, if we can manage it, we're asked to try to set aside our grief for a day. The situation is somewhat different for us, of course. This year, our entire community is in mourning and heartbroken. So how can we make room for our sadness and still recognize what's happening in Israel, in Gaza, and throughout the world this Purim? How can we celebrate our survival as a people and yet acknowledge the ongoing pain and suffering? One way is to lean into the mitzvot of sending mishloach manot to family and friends and neighbors, and matanot le'evyonim, gifts to those in need. We can respond to the confusion and sadness of life with a renewed commitment to generosity, expressing our care and concern and sustaining our relationships. Speaking about the mitzvah of mishloach manot, Rabbi Sharon Brous said, even from the heart of darkness, we refuse to cede agency. We make up for God's absence in the Purim narrative by redoubling our capacity for God-like living in our own. We respond to the threat of emptiness by pouring more kindness and more sweetness into the world. Mishloach manot and matanot le'evyonim come to reinforce that while we cannot control the world, we can control the way we live in it. Our Parashat today, Parashat Vayikra, begins delving into the sacrifices offered by the Kohanim in the Mishkan and the precise procedures for the priests to follow. Essentially, offering a sacrifice was a way of giving to God, sharing a portion of what the worshiper had received. Certain sacrifices also involved sharing food with the priests and with friends and family. In a way, it was not unlike mishloach manot. This beautiful mitzvah creates a circle of giving and receiving. It knits communities together and is at the heart of who we are as a people. So let's make our giving an essential part of this holiday, as essential as hearing Megillah and eating hamantashen. We're grateful to the sisterhood for preparing and delivering the beautiful mishloach manot packages that remind us that we are one caring community. And I'm grateful to each of you for contributing generously to buy mishloach manot for one another or to prepare them on your own and provide tzedakah donations this year, whether to the food pantry or elsewhere. It feels empowering to respond to our sadness and fears this year by investing in and strengthening our community. Another way to think about the mitzvah of giving tzedakah on Purim is to acknowledge our lack of control over our destinies. Give generously today, for tomorrow it could be you begging for a little spare change, writes Rabbi Brous. Give because you know in your heart that it's only an accident of history that you are here and the poor are there. Give because it would be intellectually and morally corrupt to tell the story of our people's miraculous triumph, to celebrate history's reversibility without sharing our bounty with those who now sit on the other side of fortune. Perhaps we could push ourselves and even identify with and feel empathy for those who sit on the other side in this conflict. A Palestinian who by no fault of their own was born in Gaza and yearns to breathe free, or an Israeli fighting to keep hope alive that they'll see their loved one again. Rabbi Elliot Cosgrove of Park Avenue Synagogue suggests that this year our challenge is to be eyes wide open to what's happening in Israel and Gaza, and also appreciate the here and now. We can dedicate some of our Batanot Levionim, some of our tzedakah, to causes we care about in Israel. We can give mishloach manot and take time to check in, especially with our Israeli and Muslim friends and family. I believe that the Megillah text itself gives us guidance on how to celebrate during a time of crisis. Before the Jews have breathed a sigh of relief after their narrow escape from disaster in chapter 8, the Megillah gives us a phrase that we repeat every Saturday evening at Havdalah. La Yehudim hayta ora v'simcha v'sason vikar. The Jews enjoyed light and gladness, happiness and honor. According to Tractate Megillah in the Talmud, these four elements of Ora, Simcha, Sason, and Yakar stand for specific aspects of Jewish life. Light, Ora, represents the light of Torah. Simcha is the joy of Yom Tov, of holidays. Sason is the gladness we experience performing Brit Milah. And Yakar is the honor of wearing tefillin. What do these four elements have in common? They're all core to who we are as a people. They represent our dedication to Torah study, to celebrating our holidays, keeping our Jewish calendar, and celebrating our Jewish identity with pride and dignity. The Megillah wants us to remember those things, even as we contemplate the world's pain and our own. And we Jews have internalized that lesson. If you look on the website of Yad Vashem, you'll see photographs of Purim celebrations in the ghettos of World War II. As our people have always done, may we look beyond the darkness and embrace the light of joy. And may we all, Jews and Palestinians, all of us around the world, experience the sudden turnaround that Purim represents. As the Megillah says, v'nafochu, the opposite happened. Instead of death, renewed life and celebration. May we too know such a reversal, with the return of the hostages and an end to the violence. Amen.